Hello, and we are going to talk about the biological wrap up of biomechanics, metabolism and energy systems, muscle fibers, and VO2 max in this coaching theory discussion. So it's all the four discussions that we just had previously that we're going to wrap up in this discussion all in one chart. So here's our chart here. It's going to go over weight training zones, which we did not talk about, but I'll talk about a little bit in this discussion. The lifting amounts, a percentage of 1 rep max. All right, so those three columns we're going to talk about and really expose ourselves for the first time during this discussion. Then we will have running races, swim races. So you can see the related distances to the primary energy systems, the secondary energy systems, and then the fiber types, or the primary fiber types that would be at play during this. And then, as well as the heart rate zone, the goal of the heart rate zone, and the heart rate number, beats per minute, and then how much rest you would take between intervals should you be doing an interval workout in these zones. So, without further ado, we'll start with our first zone, which is our recovery zone. Recovery zone is heart rate zone number 1, has heart rate between 120 and 140 beats per minute. Rest is continuous, so you're not stopping, it's just continuously going. Primary energy system is called the Krebs cycle. It does depend on the secondary energy system. As we talked about, all energy systems are going at all times, just in different percentages. But in this one, you really would keep just to the Krebs cycle if you're doing a true recovery workout. Now, you can have a race in this zone, which would be ultra racing or ultra running, whether you're doing a 10K swim, a 50K run, or a 100-mile run. So that's the types of races that you would do in this zone. Then you have zone number 2, endurance zone. So this is where you're pushing that pace a little bit, between 140 and 157 beats per minute. Again, continuous Krebs cycle, type 1 muscle fiber. This is where you're doing a marathon or a 10K swim, or at least where you'd start out for your marathon or 10K swim, and then due to cardiac drift, you drift into zones 3 and 4. Um, but you'd at least start out probably at the top of this zone. This is also the zone that you'll do your endurance workouts. So your once a week, hour to 3 hour workout, you'll do in this particular zone. Then you have zone number 3. This is your tempo zone. So this is where you really start pushing some of the paces. All right, you start pushing pretty hard. So you're going to be using the Krebs cycle as well as the secondary system, the glycolysis, 157 to 170 beats per minute, continuous running. All right. Now, this one, your running race, you might be doing a mile race, somewhere between that mile and 10K area. Swim race is between that 400 meter to 1600 meter swim or 1500 meter swim. So you're pushing that pace for a mile. You know what? You could probably push into some of the other zones higher, but you might want to start out at this zone in the beginning, depending on the race, and kind of work your way into it. So, and then zone number 4, we have our sub-threshold zone. This is our absolute red line racing zone, in the aerobic capacity. So 170 to 179 beats per minute. Again, talking about how these heart rate beats are based on a max heart rate of 200 beats per minute. So someone who has a max heart rate of 200 beats, if you have something higher or lower, these levels may fluctuate, and they may fluctuate anyway based on your own training and skill sets. So heart rate zone sub-threshold, we're working, this is all type 1 muscle fiber. Primary system is a Krebs cycle. Secondary system is glycolysis. This is where if you do an 800-meter race, running race, or a 200-meter swimming race, you're in this zone where you're really pushing hard, redlining. You really can't continue past this point, especially towards the end of the race as your cardiac drift goes. But you'll be really pushing during this point. And then you have zone number 5. This is our first anaerobic zone. So this is where we're talking about intervals quite a bit. And we have our heart rate zone. This is 5A, or the super threshold zone. Fiber types, you're starting to primarily use type 2A muscle fiber. Primary energy system is glycolysis, with secondary as Krebs cycle. So this is where you're starting to push that beats per minute, 179 to 186. Your rest per interval should be probably less than 30 seconds, or about 30 seconds. If you're doing let's say a 400-meter running interval, a 100-meter swimming interval, we're looking at about a 30-second rest period in this heart rate zone. So this is the first zone that we get into weight training and resistance training. And so there's something called 1 rep max, where basically if you're doing an exercise, that is the maximum amount of weight that you can lift at any one given time. And this column shows the percentage of your 1 rep max, and then how many reps you should be able to do based on that amount of percentage of your 1 rep max, and then the goal of that weight training zone. So this goal is endurance, and don't be confused with aerobic endurance down here. This is anaerobic endurance. All right, anaerobic endurance. So that's in zone 5A. This is where you do 20 push-ups. All right, that's that in anaerobic endurance zone of 60% or less of your 1 rep max. And then you get a little bit faster, all right, or a little bit heavier, where the heart rate zone 5B1, this is type 2A muscle fiber primarily, your VO2 max zone, primarily using glycolysis. Creatine phosphate becomes a secondary system. This is 186, 194 beats per minute. Rest is about 30 to 90 seconds, so you're getting a bit more rest on this one, all right, for any intervals that you may do in this zone. A running race, you'd be doing about a 200-meter race, or half a track, whereas a swimming race, you'd be doing 1 lap down and back, or just 1 length if you're using a 50-meter pool. So in the weight training zone here, this is the hypertrophy zone, and the muscle growth zone. This is where you'd be doing 60 to 80% of your 1 rep max. If your 1 rep max in the leg press is 500 pounds, so this may be this might be 300 to 400 pounds, somewhere in there. And you should be able to do somewhere between 8 and 12 repetitions every set that you do a leg press in that particular situation. And that will lead to muscle growth. All right, so that's what this is here, the hypertrophy zone. Then you have 5B2. 5B2, same thing cardiovascular-wise, where same heart rate, but you're pushing. All right, these two zones, heart rate-wise, get a little dicey because of how much unless you're using a heart rate strap, you really can't get an exact heart rate, so we kind of zone it out that way. All right. This is where you get a little bit heavier and a little bit faster. This is your 100-meter race, your 25-meter swim, so 1 length of the pool, 1/4 of the track. Your rest is increasing dramatically, so 2 to 3 minutes of rest between intervals, type 2X muscle fibers as their primary. And then the weight training zones, this is your strength zone. So this is more about the strength and that you're getting out of your lift. And so this is 75 to 85% of your 1 rep max, and you can only do about 4 to 8 reps of a particular exercise before you're going to fail. And then finally, the last one is your max zone. This is all out, all right? This might be your max sprint, type 2X muscle fiber. This is where your creatine phosphate system is primary as an energy system. ATP storage is secondary. And then you have 193 to max beats per minute for your heart rate zone. If you're doing intervals in this situation, you'd be doing 3 to 5 minutes of rest. Now, I want you to understand how long 3 to 5 minutes is. I have been talking for about 9 minutes. So this would be 2 rest periods. All right, so if you're doing 3 sets, the amount of time it takes to watch this would be the amount of time you'd be taking in rest for 3 sets of an exercise. it's a lot of rest, but you need to do that rest. If you're pushing this hard, it means you need to do this rest in order to perform and train yourself effectively. All right, so this is really fast acceleration, both in running and swimming. Really pertains to max lifting, where you're doing 85 to 95% of your 1 rep max. For lifting, that's about 1 to 4 reps, and it's your max zone. So this is a summary of everything that we've talked about over the past few discussions and lectures. Really wanted you to understand all the different zones and how they correlate with the primary and secondary energy systems, as well as what races, either in running or swimming, that you may see or may use some of these primary, secondary, and fiber types as well, and what the goal is for the intervals you may be doing, what the heart rate zones may be, what the heart rate beats may be, and what the rest intervals may be, as well as kind of expose you a little bit to some weight training zones as well. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for taking a look at this, and we'll see you in the next discussion.